Okay, today we're going to talk about the 5.45 by 39 cartridge. And the reason I'm making a video on this is another military surplus cartridge that, let's say, going through the history of collecting military surplus and the circumstances behind it, much like the 7.62 by 25 millimeter. This is a cartridge that has a very strange story to it. What it is, it still is the standard Russian military rifle round for the AK74 style, even though the Russians, I guess, do field versions of the AK-47 that are more modernized. I forget, they're like in a series of 100 and something, and basically all they are is guns. They have like rail systems and that, can put optic sights on them quite easy and holographic sights, but it is still the standard used. Now, we go back to the period of time when communism fell in the 90s, the import laws were changed in the 80s, so these ammunition and guns could come in, the older ones could come in. And so then when we get past the year 2000, this is when, after communism fell, all these communist bloc countries, Poland, or Eastern European countries, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia especially, there was a bit of a war there, and then it broke up into several countries, but all of these regions were under the Russian control, used Russian weapons and ammunition. Now all of these countries we went in there, even the Ukraine is talking about going into NATO, they've all disaligned themselves with Russia and aligned themselves with the United States, the rest of Europe, and getting into the European Union and NATO, which means that they have to scrap all the old Soviet weapons. Some countries still keep them, but retool them up to a different caliber, but the older guns all had to go. So henceforth, we got all these at the time, 7.62 by 25 millimeter. It's kind of obsolete, but it was in storage and they sold it to get rid of it. Now the only thing is, at the time, there were no guns chambered in this 5.45 by 39. They were very few and far between. But now they're no longer using the ammo. So a very strange situation happened where huge stockpiles of this ammunition were sold on the surplus market. We're here in the United States. And the only thing that you could do to get a weapon that would fire this is to build a semi-automatic kit from an actual AK-74 that was cut up and brought in as a parts kit, because at the time, U.S. law, all I had to do was cut the receiver. You take all the rivets out, put a semi-automatic receiver with a semi-automatic trigger group and parts in there, and rebuild the rifle. And now you got a rifle. That was quite common. Later on, because the ATF and the government didn't like this, there was a ruling later on to where they could not bring intact barrels in. The barrel had to be destroyed, okay, or removed or cut with a torch. So that ended building your own parts kit. You can still get them without the barrel. It's a little bit more difficult to assemble one, and there were companies that would make brand new barrels to fit right in there, okay? But that was how we were getting them. And eventually later on, the guns with the ammunition here, so much of it, people really didn't know about it. There was piles of it, and it was not expensive, okay? And actually Smith & Wesson, for 2 years, made a rifle chambered in this caliber, actually commercially produced an AR platform that would use this round. Okay, there were the foreign-made guns that eventually started coming through, but this was really never a caliber that people would go after, was that popular. Most people didn't even know what an AK-74 was, all right? But for a time, there was a ton of this ammunition. Okay, here it was dirt cheap to the point where companies were actually manufacturing in the U.S. new production guns to fit this caliber because there was so much of it, and nobody knew. Now, and I'll go through when we look at the history of the cartridge. Now it's a different story, and any of us that have rifles in this caliber are now nervous that with this Russian ban, it will cut off the importation of this round. But later on in the video, it can be reloaded, and I'll talk about that. So now we're going to go into the actual history of the cartridge and look at it compared to the 5.56 and the AK-47 round 7.62x39. Okay, the history of this bullet. In the early 1970s, the Russians decided that they wanted to more or less catch up with the U.S. and the rest of us with the success of the M16 rifle using the small caliber, light ammo, high velocity ammunition. Okay, and this was a trend with all modern militaries. So what we have here is the original Russian-made caliber in the 5.45, and also this ammunition is banned from importation and has been since 2014. This is the recent ammo I've gotten, and both of these cartridges are made at Tula. This is a military contract for the Russian military. This is civilian, the white box here. Notice it has the polymer coating other than the steel lacquer, and the bullets are different, and I'll explain that in a bit. This is a standard 5.54 NATO round with a 55 grain bullet, and this is the AK-47 round, okay, just for comparison. So the Russians decided to design this new cartridge here. Okay, and what they did is had a team of engineers that designed the cartridge starting in the early 70s, and they come up with this. And what they did is they came up with a cartridge, and part of what, if you look at the shape of this 223 cartridge compared to this, what they did is design a cartridge with, I think, a wider case and a longer. If you notice, this bullet is way longer and slender as compared to the 55 grain 223 round, and this is a 60 grain round. And I believe this bullet diameter is 4,000 smaller, something like that. So they designed this case, they designed this long slender bullet with a boat tail for the ballistic reasons. And then they had Kalashnikov go and remodify the AK rifle for this round. And that we'll go over more of that when we look at the rifle. But so now they got the cartridge. And the thing about this cartridge, this here is what is called the 7N6, which was the original cartridge that they developed. This is called the poison bullet by the Afghans because how this bullet is made, there is a soft steel rod in here. There's your jacket, and the rod is in a lead plug, and the end is plugged with a bolt tail. But there's a small air gap about here, which keeps the center of gravity to the rear of the bullet. And the idea was, though it's been claimed for other things, that this was to be a penetrating bullet. Keeping that steel rod in the back change the center of gravity, and then the bullet at the velocity would penetrate through. But what they found is that air pocket, which when this ammunition in the gun was first discussed, they said this air pocket was the Russians trying to circumvent the Geneva Convention and make a bullet that would tear up, a living human being. When this hits a soft target or a living person, this bullet tumbles and does all kinds of weird stuff. So this was what they said the Russians were diabolical about this. Okay, But on the other hand, early experiments with the M16 rifle and the ammunition, because Eugene Stoner just went and took an off-the-shelf commercial cartridge, 223, and adopted it, which became the 5.54, for military use. And the first experimental guns that the government was testing with the ammunition, with I think a 55 grain bullet, also had the same effect. What they had to do is change the rifling and some other things about the ammunition in the development of the M16, and that was dealt with. But original first reports said that this thing would tear up whoever got hit by it, and it was, outcries of, the Geneva Convention and going against humanity, using bullets that tore up people. So they had the same thing. But where I think this is false is because the Russians went and developed quite quickly after, and you have to remember this is first deployed when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. And in the U.S. we knew nothing about this weapon or ammunition. And only in Soldier of Fortune magazine did I see this gun and the bullets and that way back, like in the late 70s, early 80s, was the only information we had at that time. So this was a very mysterious thing. And anyway, the Russians quickly developed, that's a 7N6, they did a 7N10, 7N24, and a 7N39. They intended this bullet to penetrate, like steel, the body armor, helmets, and this. And they found this original bullet, this here, even though the Afghans call it the poison bullet, for its intents and purposes of what they wanted, military-wise, was insufficient. And since then they have changed this to tungsten carbide core or something, and now it can penetrate steel and everything else. But in 2014, the ATF, like I said in the beginning of this video, the market was flooded with this stuff. I mean, it was all over, and I think what it was is there really wasn't a lot of guns that can shoot it. So this was a bit, even to the point where there was so much of it, Smith & Wesson actually went and people started making AR uppers that you can shoot this caliber. I think you can still get an AR upper. So this was a situation until 2014. The ATF is determined that all of this Russian military grade ammo is, they called it armor piercing handgun ammo. Now how the hell they got up that, I don't know. Armor piercing handgun ammo, so now it is totally banned from importation. Okay, so you can't buy this ammo anymore. So that's, and if you look at the bullets, you'll see that the bullets, I don't know if you can see, are different. In this civilian ammo, this is a different bullet, so it's probably not made the same way. It's probably just a full metal jacket bullet with a lead core. Okay, so now we go and we talk about, people go, well, is this bullet better or caliber better than what we use in the M16 and that? Some people say yes, some people say no. And really there's no way to tell, because nobody makes like a civilian bolt action rifle that'll shoot this. Something high quality, very accurately made gun. You only have your AK clones, civilian made AK style guns, or the guns that they're called sporting guns are made with wood stocks and no muzzle brakes or anything like that. So, and there's not a lot of commercial guns made in this caliber with popularity. But let's talk about an interesting fact on the cartridge itself. They did a measurement of recoil impulse, okay, in the perspective rifle. This cartridge here in the AK74, this cartridge here in the M16A2, and this cartridge in the AK47. The 5.45 in the AK74 generates 2.5 foot-pounds of recoil energy. That's the amount of force the gun is recoiling. I guess they got a way of measuring it. So that's it, 2.5 foot-pounds, okay, of force. In the M16 with the standard NATO load, and I don't know which grain it is, probably 62 grain, okay. The M16 generates 4.75 foot-pounds of energy in recoil in that platform. And the AK-47 with its standard round generates 5.3 foot-pounds of recoil energy. So in terms of recoil impulse in said weapons, this has the lightest recoil of all of them. Okay, but is yet still zipping a bullet out there to fulfill the military requirements. Okay, so that's the difference between all of them. If any one type is better or that, I don't really know. So that's about all I know on the history and the difference. Let's go into reloading. Now, as everyone knows with reloading, okay, all your steel-cased ammo from Russia is going to be cheaper than going through the trouble of buying reloading equipment and reloading it, no matter what caliber it is and all the various calibers they get. The price point on this steel-cased stuff is way low. But if we don't get it anymore, Hornady, I thought Hornady was using the steel cases and loading it. Maybe they did it first. Hornady has a source of brass reloadable cases. Okay, it was for sale. It's sold out now. You can't find it, but Hornady did produce it. Also, Hornady makes a bullet of the correct diameter and the correct weight, AMAX bullet with a little red tip. So Hornady does produce a projectile that will fit, that is the correct bullet for this caliber. Granted, reloading, you're looking at, they're sold out, but the last price was like 60 cents for the brass case, and let's say 20 cents, I can't remember, for the bullet. So you're looking right there at $1, the reloading components, right there, excluding powder and primer. So let's say realistically you're looking at about $1.30 a round to reload it. Under the old prices, who the hell knows now. But it can be done. And yes, granted, in guns like this, people like take hundreds of rounds. Reloading for these little lightweight semi-automatics that we like to rattle off 100 rounds on is kind of a pain, but it can be done, and you can shoot the gun depending on your shooting needs. It's not going to be dirt cheap. This stuff is probably just like the 223 ammo, $5 a box. I paid about $10 for this now, okay? And a lot of places that have it and have it reasonable will limit you to 3 or 4 boxes at a time. Someone said, well, Midway's got it for $9.99. But you can only get 3 boxes, okay? Not 20 or so like I did, all right? That's so, got to take the good with the bad. Reloading dies are available. Hornady dies are about, let's say $50. I looked, they're sold out. They're $50. RCBS did make them. They're special custom order. They were over $200, but you could get Hornady dies for this caliber and probably a shell holder from them that'll fit their brass. And it's, it's the $50, $60 mark, so it's not terrible. So reloading for this can be done. I checked, Starline does not. It makes 7.62 by 39 brass, so Starline, if people request it and talk to them, may be able to produce this brass in quantity. Okay, Hornady is the only one that really has reloadable brass available. So you don't have to panic there. Yes, it would be more expensive than what you know, like I said, I got this for $10 and just a brass case and the bullet would cost you 20 without powder and primer. So yeah, it's an expense, but you can still reload and shoot the gun. All right. So it's not impossible. It's just if the steel cased ammo does not come in, you do have reloading options. Okay, it's just a lot more expensive. So the future of this, I don't know. This ammunition was produced in several different countries. I know it was produced by PPU down in Yugoslavia. Okay, so if they would make it with the steel case or if they would make it with brass, it's going to be more expensive, but still PPU ammunition, once they get into production and start importing it, will be lower than most others, okay? Lower than what Hornady makes it for. I think I've seen some of the Hornady ammunition available somewhere. I'm not quite sure, or maybe it was sold out. I don't know if Hornady produces the ammunition anymore. They had a lot of these odd calibers they did for a period of time, and none of them sold well, and they kind of dropped them all from the line. But, so, let's wrap it up with a conclusion. Okay, so the question is, should you run out and sell your AK74 or your AK47? Okay. Yes, granted, like 35 cents a round compared to $1.50 a round is a big difference when you go out and shoot these for whatever reason. Honestly, I have not really worked much with the AK-74 and the round. I have with the AK-47 and the round that goes in that. But if you're a collector, if you're into military history, these are kind of a must-have in your gun collection. Even though you may not shoot them much, they are fun to shoot. And like I said, with the low recoil impulse on this gun, it's a pretty tough one to beat. It's an interesting gun, and it is fun to shoot. So that's up to you, because already I've heard people saying you're going to see a ton of these guns for sale. People are going to start getting rid of them for that reason alone. Okay, and I guess we all just have to realize it doesn't matter what we shoot. The sport is becoming expensive, and there's a lot of factors out there kind of against us when it comes to recreational shooting and collecting military surplus guns. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the video, got some information out of it. Stay tuned.